I'm recreating Flynn's Safehouse from Tron Legacy.
I'll show you how I brought this futuristic masterpiece to life by blocking out my shot, texturing, adding 3D assets, a couple final touches, then rendering it all out in Blender. Stick around until the end, because I'm going to see if a true Tron enthusiast can spot the difference between my render and the original. Before I even touch Blender, I go into research mode. Step 1, gather references. Basically, stuff to copy. I break my project into 2 categories. Creating something from scratch, so a made-up environment, or recreating something that already exists, like a movie or a game scene.
This project, definitely category 2. My goal is simple. Find every image of the place I can. Every nook, cranny, and detail needs to be captured. I screenshotted like crazy.
Then organize everything in PureRef, a free tool that helps me use these images as reference.
This next step is a game changer for any environment project.
Scene blocking. Blocking out a scene means using simple, primitive shapes to figure out the proportions of your environment. It's like a rough sketch before the masterpiece. It saves you a ton of time by avoiding constant rescaling later. Plus, it gives you a solid view of the final render, keeping your motivation up throughout the project. To make this process even smoother, I always work on a real-world scale. That means I look up the average dimensions of real objects and apply them in Blender.
Trust me, this small step is a huge time saver.
When you eventually bring in detailed 3D assets, they'll slot in perfectly in your scene without any tweaking. For this project, I kicked things off by blocking out the main house using 2 cubes for the roof and the floor. Added some gigantic cliffs to surround the house and a little balcony.
It's still rough around the edges, but it already feels like it's on track to look epic.
To cover up those bland white cubes, let's find some rock textures. Over to Quixelbridge.
What? Quixelbridge is leaving?
I've got my texture downloaded. I copy the file location, Control-C. Then head into Blender, I go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and make sure the Node Wrangler is enabled.
This little gem unlocks some seriously helpful shortcuts that make node work feel like a breeze.
After selecting a principled BSDF shader, I hit Control-Shift-T.
And bam!
I can quickly find the texture I want to add. I paste the file location we copied earlier using Control-V.
And here's the wild part.
I hit A inside the folder and it selects everything. Then when I click Open, the add-on works its magic and sorts all the textures into the right inputs, instantly creating a PBR texture.
If I'm gonna pull off the illusion that my render is the real deal, I'm gonna have to nail these textures.
Looking closer at my reference, I can spot some white streaks cutting through the rock on the cliffs there.
Okay, how did I make that?
I added noise texture in the shader editor with Shift-A, then press Control-T to add the mapping nodes. I stretched the Y scale and squashed the X scale down. Now we have those streaks. I then changed my noise texture to 4D to unlock this W value, which can generate different phases of the texture. I plugged this white noise texture into a color ramp that went into a mixed color where I have my edgeware node setup plugged in. I then brought this mixed color into a mixed shader as a factor and plugged in a principled BSDF node at the bottom for the input, having a rough texture plugged into the color and roughness value to create this look. Then selected everything and pressed Control-G to make a node group. I opened that node group and added the group input in the top section of the mixed shader. Now we can add this little node to any texture and instantly get that wear and tear look. I use this edgeware trick in almost every one of my projects now. I have a link in the description to a blend file with a step-by-step guide on how to add this to your project without doing any work in the shader editor.
Comment down below if you want a video on this, and I'll make it happen. As good as that huge cliff looks, without this next step, I won't be able to see anything.
Lighting is crucial for a solid render.
Thankfully, we can just copy the movie.
It looks like these ceilings have a glowing ring inside them. I modeled this using a circle, inset in the middle, and beveling at the top. These lights need to blend with the rest of the ceiling though, so I added a plane and filled in all the faces around the circle to smooth out the transition from circle to square.
But plot twist, this isn't the only light in the scene.
The entire floor is lit up.
How am I gonna do that? What if I make the floor glass and add lights below it? Brilliant, right? Well, not really.
I didn't want the whole floor to be glass, just the square parts. So I had to select each face individually.
Then, here's the cool part.
I hit Control Numpad Plus to select every face next to the ones I had selected. It's like a cool magic trick, except not really, because you can do it manually by going to Select at the top, clicking More, and boom, selection power. After that, I assigned a glass texture to the faces and a shiny white texture to the rest by pressing Control-I to invert the selection. Then I duplicated the whole mesh, scaled it up, locked it on the Z-axis, then typed -1 to flip it.
Easy, right? Wrong.
I had to manually select every single face again. After what felt like a century, I finally saw how it looked, and it was horrible. I must have spent hours tweaking the glass texture to get it right. Is it perfect? Nope. But let's move on before my eyeballs explode from staring at this thing for too long.
Next up, the rocky walls. For the longest time, I avoided geometry nodes. Why? Because I'm stubborn. But after an attempt to learn geometry nodes in one day, I discovered a technique that changed everything.
No more placing rocks manually. Like, who even does that anymore?
Once I figured this out, I was practically a professional beginner.
And boom, I had my rocks. Magic.
Now, let's talk about that pool. If there's one texture that never looks right, it's water. It's like trying to catch a slippery frog.
The main part is easy. Just make it shiny and color it blue. Now, let's get nerdy here. I changed the IQR to 1.333, which is the index of refraction of water, then added a wave texture, flipped it to the Y, cranked the scale, and added distortion. Then I animated the phase offset to give it that natural choppy movement. I also mixed it in with a moving noise texture to break up the repetitive wave pattern. Finally, I ran it through a bump node with a distance of 0.1 and a strength of 0.2, plugged it into the normal of the BSDF node, and boom, wave pool achieved.
But let's make it even more real.
I had a mixed shader, plugged a transparent BSDF in, and used the light path node for the factor. Before, after.
Still not perfect, but I'm moving on before this becomes an existential crisis about water physics.
About those glowing dots on the wall.
That had me scratching my head for a while. But guess what? I figured it out.
I used a Voronoi texture, plugged it in with a color amp, and then mixed it with some noise to break it up a bit. And voila! Alpha plugged in, and there it is.
Let's make the rest of the house now.
This part was a little rough because, well, Flynn's Safehouse is not a perfect square.
Who knew, right?
I started by extruding the back wall to make a lower section of the house. I curved the back wall and inverted the lights for that extra glow. Then, I made 2 lower sections of the floor for Flynn's light cycle and board game. Flynn still needs somewhere to sleep though, so I added a Boolean modifier inside my geometry node setup to carve out his bed space. But now I need walls. I had a little cubicle for his bed, and done!
But wait, I had to do the rest of the house.
So I went to the top-down view, selected these faces, and used Y to separate them from the other faces. But oh no, there's holes in the floor, better add some walls. Done.
On to my favorite part, adding furniture. Seriously, this is a game changer. Thanks to BlenderKit, not sponsored, but it should be, I found a chair that looked exactly like the one from the movie. I just searched chair, and boom, it was there. Perfect match. It was almost too easy. I have an affiliate link in the description for BlenderKit.
I also made the board game by creating a cube with a glowing top and using another Voronoi texture to create that gridded look. This house is looking good.
But if I want it to look identical to the original, I need to step it up.
Time for the final touches. Adjust the lighting to make sure it's not too bright, move the furniture around, mess with all the textures, and add a bookshelf.
Because who doesn't want a bookshelf?
Then animate the camera.
And boom, we're almost there. But wait, Blender was slowing down faster than me after lag day.
Every time I saved, I watched that spinning wheel of doom for what felt like hours.
I recently got a new PC with an RTX 4060 Ti and an AMD Ryzen 7700. So I'm like, I'm ready to crush this. Well, even with a good system, Blender still struggles if your scene isn't optimized.
Turns out that the wall with the bed is taking up all the processing power. So I just applied the modifier, and boom, way faster.
That took me way too long to figure out.
Since this render is lit up well, I could turn down my samples to 288 and still see almost no difference in quality. So I went into DaVinci Resolve for color grading and finished this beast of a project.
It's done. You know what that means. I'm gonna show you a series of 4 images of Flynn's Safehouse. And one of those images will be my render. Let's see if you can find out which one it is.
I would have to say the bottom right.
Is that your final answer?
That's my final answer.
Here's the second one.
Close up chair there. Vehicle. I don't recall that close up on the top right, so I'm gonna say the top right.
Is that your final answer?
That's my final answer.
For this first image, my render is the bottom right one here.
Oh, I got
So
it
you were
right.
correct. See that in this next shot, my render in this second one is the top right here. So you were correct twice. It's